Today, we take a look at an idyllic off-grid property surrounded by rainforest. We meet Julius, whose dad, about 40 years ago, bought the property and with the help of Julius's mum, completely transformed and regenerated the land. And I must say, today is quite a special episode because, well, Julius is actually my husband. So tell us a little bit about the property.
So Dad bought this place back in the 80s and it was just an empty block of land back then. There was a couple of trees around the perimeter, but you could see the mountains and there was nothing here. Mum joined along the way and helped establish a lot of the gardens as well.
And how big's the property?
So 7-acre property.
And you have quite a special connection to the place. Why is that?
Yeah, so for starters, Dad built the place, so I've got that's quite special, but also I was actually born here and so was my brother. So we feel really closely tied to the property, even though I've lived away from it for a number of years.
You were actually born in the living room of the house. I've seen the photos.
Home birth. No, definitely a connection to a property that probably a lot of people don't have.
And you said, you know, you lived away. What's it like coming back each time?
Oh, it's always really special, and it always feels like home coming back.
There's quite a lot of beauty around here, but one thing in particular that I always appreciate is the flowers. Yeah,
Mum was definitely on the creating the colour and the flower and stuff that comes up every year and attracts a lot of native birds and bees and things like that.
So what are some things that you and your family have done to attract the wildlife and the biodiversity?
A lot of native grevilleas and things like that attract a lot of the honey eaters. We've got a little pond there that brings in some frogs, and birds come in and bathe there, and at the various bird baths and things set up around there. And we did grow up with a dog, and then there was another dog. Unfortunately, they've both since moved on to greener pastures, but since not having had the dogs here, we've had a lot of paddy melons. They can be a bit of a pain sometimes eating things you're trying to grow, or even things you're trying to grow for aesthetics. They come and eat it, but they are very cute, and it's nice to have that wildlife so close.
Tell us a little bit about the house and the type of place that your dad and mum wanted to establish here in terms of off-grid and whatnot.
Yeah, both of them very environmentally conscious, I suppose, and so being fairly remote and then I guess having limited options for services and such, the whole property is off-grid, so solar system, batteries, backup generator, about 70,000 litres in water storage at various tanks around the property that's all collected from the roofs. Yeah, no service connection other than the internet, which we get via satellite.
So we've made our way into the actual vegetable garden section. I see we've got some wicking beds here. How are you finding those? Yeah,
well, obviously you were sort of key to establishing those, but just being in such a hot, humid climate here in Australia, water is very critical to gardening. So we've been trialling out these wicking beds made from these IBC containers to try and see if that's effective with growing some veggies with minimal sort of water loss. And it's been quite effective at the moment. We've sort of harvested a lot of the stuff out of it, but it was really thriving.
Yeah. I think one thing to be aware of is it works really well for established plants, but those new seedlings definitely need watering in because the top layer does get quite dry. But we have tested different levels.
A bit more water depth in it has been really good. I think it would be good to get some more of these up and running. It gets them up above those paddy melons and things that try and get in and eat it, and it just makes it a bit easier to work with. Yeah, they've been really effective. It's been quite impressive.
It doesn't stop the grasshoppers, which is why we've been using those nets over it. But I mean, it can't always be perfect. You got to share some of it, some produce. And as you can see, some dahlias have even made their way into it. So the garden looks a lot different to what it did 30, 40 years ago. What was the original design for the garden?
Yeah, so originally, as I said, there was nothing here. It was sort of just a paddock, and then Mum and Dad established a lot of the fruit trees from young plants. And it was a circular design originally, a sprinkler in the middle there, and then we had a round chicken dome, which is sitting back there overgrown at the moment, and it used to get rotated around the sort of centre point, moving the chickens along, and then you'd plant veggies in behind, so it would keep sort of revitalising the ground. But then we sort of moved away from that. Dad built a bit of a shade house for those hotter months, and we built a permanent chook run and chook house that was a bit more secure.
We'll get to the chooks because they're one of my favourite things. But I just find the circular design so interesting because I guess as a sprinkler will go around, it goes around in a circular way. And then that way that everything's getting kind of evenly watered. I find that that's such a cool idea. And also having the chooks, you know, obviously a lot more work.
Yeah, it was. It was like a whole family sort of...
Cute. I don't think I knew this.
When we had to move them, I don't know how, I can't remember how often it was, but, you know, the 3 or 4 of us would get inside the chicken run, we'd pick it up and move it to the next spot, and kind of making sure it was secure and snakes and things couldn't get in, because we do have a lot of carpet pythons. So it is a lot of work to move them, you know, make sure they're all back in and safe in there.
But that's such a great idea. Now you mentioned that there's, you know, the wicking beds with veggies, the tunnel, but you know, I can see here there's so many herbs around as well.
Yeah, Mum definitely likes to grow a lot of herbs and have them on hand, and I'm, you know, one who really likes to cook, so for me that's an aspect that I really enjoy. A lot of basil, thyme, parsley, things like bay leaves as well. If you're cooking, you know, a spag bowl or something, it's great to have all that just on hand, especially when you're not so close to the shops. You can just duck out into the garden and grab what you need.
It's like an outdoor grocery store.
It's sort of like everything you could need for whether you're cooking Italian or you're cooking Thai. We've got, you know, lemongrass and kaffir lime and all that, and you can just go and grab it. It's really handy, and it's nice to have it fresh as well. Yeah,
I think a key thing that I think most people probably consider, but if you haven't considered this, is having it close to the house so that you can actually, you know, it's...
Pop out, yeah, grab a sprig of rosemary or whatever. You don't have to go on a mission to get it, yeah.
So we spoke about how you used to move the dome around the vegetable garden, but you have since had an upgrade.
This was the upgrade. Dad and I built the chook run, and the idea was planting it along the sort of orchard. We've got a lot of citrus, so these were quite well established, and then built this run in here, and then there's the chook house there as well where we can lock them up securely at night. And
I remember a story of you building this with your dad that just made me laugh. What was that story?
Yeah. So he was a carpenter, and obviously very detail orientated, which I suppose I am to a degree. But yeah, when we were building it, I remember wanting to go to a mate's house. I was probably about 16, 17, and we had to get the roof on, and we had it up there and it was all ready to get screwed down, and something was out by a couple of mil. Dad made us pull all the sheeting off and straighten out whatever it was and redo it all, which, you know, took however much extra time, and all I probably wanted to do was go and see my mates at the time. But yeah, no, it speaks to what sort of a person he was and his skills. Yeah.
And unfortunately, he's no longer with us.
Yeah, unfortunately not.
Great memory.
Good memories, yeah, and to have been part of, you know, helping to build it. Glad I was there, you know, on those days building it.
And one thing that I often hear is that when you have citrus trees, not to fertilise them too heavily when they're at flower, because the flowers can drop and therefore limited or no fruit. But it seems to work quite well here.
Yeah, well, it's news to me. I don't know too much about fertilising fruit trees, but I suppose part of the idea with this style of run was that the nutrients from the chickens would feed the fruit trees, and it's worked wonders. Like I said, these trees were probably established for 20 years before we put the chicken run in here, and they've probably doubled in height, some of the citrus trees now, and they fruit prolifically, so much so that often Mum's given away fruit in peak season.
The good thing about that is the roots can actually kind of take as much or as little as they need. Yeah. Absolutely great design, and I think something, if I ever built something like this, I would totally replicate that design.
It's almost like a self-fertilising. Mum still puts a lot of work into mulching and fertilising stuff, but it goes a long way having them right next to the chicken run. It's been really, really impressive.
So we've chatted a lot about the citrus here, but there's so many other fruit trees. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Yeah,
well, unfortunately not citrus season at the moment, but yeah, there's a lot of other stuff in addition to it, sort of set up in rows so that you can maintain it, mow it, But we've got bananas, there's some tamarillos there, jaboticabes, there's some apple trees, although they're not particularly suited to this environment.
Guava?
Got guavas, yeah, that have probably need a prune.
Maybe a couple of years ago.
Yep. But yeah, and then broadly sort of around the property, there's some avocado trees, mangoes.
Mulberries?
There's, mulberries, there's some pecans and some macadamia trees as well. So harvest varies a lot depending on the season and how much water there's been and how much the wildlife gets into it, because that always seems to be a bit of a challenge.
We do have some king parrots feasting on the pear tree, like nibbling little bits off everyone instead of just deciding, I'll just have one. Nope.
It is a shame they can't just, have their bit and eat the whole thing. No.
Because we're happy to share.
Yeah, it is kind of cute too. Like, you've got these beautiful birds coming in and hanging around because of it, but sometimes it means you get a lot less out of the garden.
One of the features in the garden that I particularly love is this brom / pineapple / whatever else is in here garden. But there's actually another reason to why this is here, not just for aesthetics and beauty. Yeah,
it's sort of a new addition that Mum has put in, and it's just a practical one really. It's a beautiful red cedar tree in the centre there, but the buttress roots are quite a nuisance to mow around. So Mum got sick of that, so she's planted a lot of broms and pineapples. We've actually got some pretty good looking pineapples on there at the moment. Yeah, quite a nice garden, but it was more out of practicality than anything. Yeah.
Less damage to the mower.
Definitely, yeah. So we'll head down to the creek now and we'll have a bit of a look at the work that's going on down here. I mean, it's kind of hard to picture, but none of this was here. It was all grazing land or weeds. And here's actually some recent clearing works I've been doing to get on top of some of the lantana that's been creeping in, because that's sort of the edge of the property. So this is really one of my favourite parts of the property. It's where the creek wraps around. Spent hours down here as a kid, sailing boats and playing in the water and stuff. But yeah, all of this, Mum and Dad and the neighbours as well, incredible effort with groups like Landcare, getting a lot of the plants and getting a lot of these plants in as sort of saplings, seedlings, and looking after them as they establish themselves. And now we feel like we're in a forest and stuff starting to self-seed and really look after itself. All the weeds have sort of been kept down under here as well. And just then I started to hear a bit of a frog over in this direction. Frog going off over there. It's really nice clear water that comes down off the mountain. Turtles and catfish and things like that in the water as well. So, but yeah, it's just such a beautiful spot down here. There's something very satisfying about getting out in the garden and working with your hands. I do really enjoy getting out in the bush and doing a bit of bush regeneration, doing some clearing of weeds and lantana. And I always feel really satisfied when I've cleared a bit of bush or replanted some sort of area, and it's a bit meditative almost. You kind of get in there and get in a bit of a flow, and yeah, it's just very peaceful. Well, thank you for showing me around. I guess I know the place pretty well, but it's always nice to get a personalised tour from your husband. No, it's been a pleasure, and yeah, always nice to show it around to visitors and family.